School Safety Committee meeting here at Chamblee Charter High School. First, I want to thank all those that are here from DeKalb County, and if you could, raise your hands real quick. Please give them a round of applause for this beautiful setup this morning. We appreciate it so much. We're going to begin the way we always do with a blessing and the Pledge of Allegiance. So if I could ask our Senator Kirkpatrick to open us up with a word.
Please pray with me. Almighty God, thank you for this beautiful day in Georgia. Thank you for our free country, which allows us to have different points of view. Give us strength and wisdom as we address this most important issue. And be with those who protect us every day and put their lives on the line for us. Help us to remember that we're more same than different. In your Son's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you. And then I've got a very special person to come up and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I've got Cadet Lieutenant Colonel Sky Williams. If you'd please lead us in the pledge. All rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel. Again, we appreciate everybody coming out today. We have a packed agenda. This is the fourth meeting of the School Safety Committee from the Georgia Senate. Our first meeting was held in Sandy Springs. Then we moved to North Georgia up to Ringgold. Then we moved to South Georgia down to Lee County. We're here today back in the metro area, obviously. And then we're going to go out to the coast of Savannah in October. We will round up the final meeting at the Capitol in November, where we will finalize our report and recommendations. There are some new people in the audience today and some folks that come back again from some original meetings, so thank you for participating. I'm going to give you a quick overview. Back during the legislative session, we all met together and crafted Senate Resolution 935, which was the resolution that created this committee. It was appointed by Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle, and 9 people sit in this committee, several here today, a couple are out of town. They will introduce themselves in just a few moments. The purpose of this committee is to go around the state and hear from different areas. We know that one size does not fit all. We have very urban, rural, and suburban areas. And we want to make sure that we come up with solutions that will best fit each one of those. We also want to rely on the extraordinary great work that our school systems are doing. Our school administrators and our teachers and our parent involvement are critical. We've really broken this down to 3 different areas now that we're focusing on. One is prevention, to make sure hopefully a tragedy would never happen. Next is the physical security of the building and the people in it. And last but certainly not least is if there is any type of an incident, the response there too. In each community, we are always hearing from a student, from a parent, from a teacher, from a school administrator, as well as local first responders, both police and fire. Aside from that, we bring in special guest speakers to talk to us about certain things they have learned, and we brought in folks from the state police and Georgia emergency management and other areas. Today we'll hear from the GBI and others. I would ask that everyone here today, if you please stay involved with this committee. This is not a one-time committee meeting. Behind you, you'll see our website. It's Georgia GA Senate, K12safety.com. We're getting a lot of feedback, and we want people from all over the state to fill out the information, and we want to hear from you. We want to hear about what your thoughts and your ideas are. We've gotten a lot of feedback already. I also have placed in front on the stage here forms. If you want to use the old paper route, you can come up and fill those out. Before we're done, Samantha will gather those up for each one of us so we can get them into our database. But we do want to hear from you as the process continues, and even though we're going to come up with a very actionable set of recommendations, which will be changes to the law, budget, rules, and regulations, it doesn't mean that the process will stop. We're going to continue to do this over time to make sure that our children, our faculty, and our teachers are safe all the time. We know it is our top priority. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask our committee members to introduce themselves real briefly. I'm going to pass it over to Senator C in a moment, but my name again is Senator John Albers. I represent most of North Fulton County and the southeast corner of Cherokee County, and I'm the chairman of the Public Safety Committee as well as this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am your favorite Georgia State Senator Valencia C., and I represent Senate District 34, That's half of Clayton and half of Fayette, and the world's busiest airport sits in my district. I am so happy to be a part of this, not only because I have grandkids in the public school system, which I want to stay safe, but because I also have a favorite son that's a part of public safety that's visiting with me today. Son, would you just let him know you're with me? He is joining the fight to make sure that we keep all kids safe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
He's really here to make sure his mother behaves. I'm Senator Fran Miller from District 40, which I represent 2 precincts in Fulton County. I represent all of DeKalb County from the Dunwoody line all the way down through Brookhaven, basically the Beaufort Highway, and I represent the 2 precincts, or well, I guess 8 precincts in Peachtree Corners. And we're very delighted to have everybody here. Particularly, I see a lot of friends out here in the audience. Particularly, I see some ladies with the red shirts. So again, we welcome you all here, and thanks for attending.
Hi, I'm Kate Kirkpatrick, and I represent almost all of East Cobb and a chunk of Sandy Springs. Happy to be here.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeff Mullis from extreme northwest Georgia near Chattanooga, Tennessee. And glad to be here. We had a meeting in Ringo, and that's my area. I want to thank Senator Alvis for his leadership, and also Senator Miller, Fran Miller, being the chair of education, now the chair of higher education. Our conversations has inspired this, and I think it's going to be one of the most important issues as we move forward is school safety. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm P.K. Martin. I represent District 9, which represents parts of Gwinnett County. Glad to have my home school district here today to present with parent, student, and teacher as well. So excited about today and about what we're going to do going forward. Thanks.
Thank you. And Senator Mullis, you preempted me. I wanted to thank again Senator Fran Miller for his great work out here in setting up this meeting location and being such a leader on all things education in the Georgia Senate. We're going to begin today with our very own director, Vernon Keenan of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. He probably needs no introduction here. He is known nationally and worldwide as a leader and has been a tremendous asset to the state of Georgia. So, Director, we look forward to hearing your comments today.
Thank you, sir. And I have with me Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Andy Mossman. Andy is the subject matter expert for GBI on school violence, and he's assigned to the Georgia Information Sharing and Analysis Center, GSAC. And he was tasked with becoming a subject matter expert to handle presentations like this. Now, back in June, Andy and I were requested by the FBI to attend a summit in Washington over school violence. And we were asked to do a presentation over how GSAC, our intelligence unit, handles threats that are received from the public and the process that we use to work with local law enforcement and the school systems to intervene to prevent an incident from happening. Subsequent to that summit, then I was asked to give testimony before the President's Commission on School Safety, where we talked about the same issue and also some of the best practices that we had learned from our counterparts in other states. So with that, I'd like to call Andy forward to give a presentation that gives an overview over school violence and then some of the best practices that we have learned in working with our counterparts in other states. Andy?
Thank you, Director Keenan, and thank you to the ladies and gentlemen of the committee for having us here today to talk on this important topic. One of the things I want to discuss initially with you are the stats, basically by the numbers and what the issue is, kind of trying to define the problem that we're having with school safety throughout our country. One of the first points I want to talk about is there has been an overall increase in active shooter incidents since 1999. As you're all aware, 1999 is when the Columbine incident happened and really put school shooting and school violence on the map for us. And since that time, we've started collecting the data, and as time progresses, Director Keenan and I were talking about this just a few moments ago, is as time progresses, we get a better idea and an understanding of the motivations behind school violence and the causation, and more importantly, the things that we can do to have an impact on school violence. Keep talking. Okay. So one of the biggest issues that we have have with school shooters or with active shooters in general is that 60% of all active shooters, all active shooting incidents are over before law enforcement ever arrives. And the significance of that statistic, whether we're talking about school shootings or shootings in the workplace, is that it tells us that law enforcement cannot solve this problem by themselves. We have to look at alternative methods to recover from these incidents and to mitigate these incidents. So since 2000, we've had an increase. We've had on average of 20 incidents over the last 4 years. The average number of fatalities and injuries in that per incident has increased. But still, the majority of incidents still occur in areas of commerce. They're business shootings, they're workplaces and not schools. Schools is a close second. I think it's around 23%. And the handgun is the most common firearm that is used in these incidents, the most powerful firearm. So it's not rifles, contrary to popular belief. It is still a handgun. Next slide. So of the 60% of incidents that ended, 40.6% ended when citizens engaged the shooter. So in other words, these incidents are ending before law enforcement are over, but a lot of times they're ended because someone decides to take action. That doesn't mean an armed citizen, that just means someone confronts the student and decides to take action. Yes, sir.
Is that 40% of the total 100 or 40% of the 60?
40% of the 60%. So, in other words, 60% of the incidents are over before law enforcement gets there, and that 40% is they're ended because someone does something. When police do arrive on scene, we're 100% effective in mitigating it. In other words, whether that's we engage the shooter and stop them, or whether they decide to give up when police arrives, or they flee. This was particularly poignant in the Parkland shooting, when some of the after action of the video from that incident showed us that as soon as he could hear and tell the police had arrived on scene and were approaching him, he simply set the weapon down and walked back. So we're very effective when we get there. The problem is with active shooter incidents is they're over in about 4 to 6 minutes. So in a school situation, it takes us 4 to 6 minutes to get there and have that impact on the shooter. It also takes 4 to 6 minutes for the 911 call to get to law enforcement. So the problem is, and the challenge we face as far as our response is shrinking that amount of time that it takes law enforcement to get there and being able to mitigate the shooting. Go back one. Right after Parkland, something that we saw that we had never seen before. Prior to Parkland, GSAC and the Fusion Center received information on about 5 school threats a year. Not a lot. And when we compare that with terrorism tips and leads, that's about equal, or excuse me, that's far, far less than terrorism tips and leads, which we get about 2 per week on those. So 5 a year is not much. But right after Parkland, in the 16 days following that, we received information on 73 separate school threats. Of those, 23% resulted in arrest. The reason we point that out isn't because law enforcement wasn't doing their job. It's because in those instances, of those 73 instances, we only have probable cause to make an arrest in 23% of those cases. Again, going to show that this problem can't be solved by law enforcement alone. And on average, and this is a very important stat, 6 bystanders in each active shooter incident observe some pre-assault indicators and do nothing. Very significant and important factor when we're talking about ways to prevent and mitigate this. So we'll move on with this. Another important fact is in 2018, June, Northeastern University listed a study of school shooters. They talked about how school shootings have been declining overall since the 90s. In the early 90s, 4 times the number of children were killed by active shooters than today. On average, only 1 of the 20 to 30 mass murders involves a school. I would argue that 1 is too many with that. But between 1992 and 2015, there have only been 16 multiple victim shootings in schools. But it seems like today, all of the school shootings are multiple victim school shootings. Only 6 school shootings in the last 35 years have involved the use of AR-15 or assault. Next slide. So when we talk about school shootings and we talk about prevention, one of the things that we consistently see, and I think the Senator alluded to that at the onset of his presentation, was that we have to have a method in place to address these incidents. And so the first thing we need to do is address reporting. We need to have a unified reporting system so that the information can get to people who can do something with it. The reporting system needs to incorporate a mechanism for us to deal with the information on the back end. In other words, it does us no good to get information about a potential threat if we can't do anything about it, we can't do anything about it quickly. So whatever solution we're looking at needs to involve an action mechanism. And then it must be marketed to the public. And I think this is the single point of failure when we deal with reporting systems. This year we started our See Something, Say Something program, or See Something, Send Something app and program within the GDI. And we intend to use this as our unified reporting system for the state of Georgia. It's an app, it's available on iTunes and at the Google Play and the App Store. And initially it was rolled out as a way to report homeland security information and terrorism information. When someone pulls this up on their smartphone and they enter tip information, maybe they see something on Facebook that a kid's talking about shooting up a school. They can simply take a screenshot of their Facebook page and send that in through the app. It goes to our 24/7 watch desk. We have a team of analysts that's monitoring this information 24/7. So when the tip comes in, they can immediately get that to local law enforcement, make contact through our management team in the GDI, and we get that to our regional terrorism specialist program and our Homeland Security Task Force, who can on the back end offer additional resources and support to local law enforcement to address these threats. We've had a significant uptick since we rolled out the program, and we went 24/7 in August. Our program actually initiated in April, and we worked through some training, and we finally went 24/7 on August 1st. But since that time, a total number of threats that have come through the watch desk is around 260. We receive on average now about 4 or 5 a week that are coming from threats generally, not necessarily to schools. It seems like since 9/11 of this month, we've had an uptick in those. We've had probably at least 4 or 5 that I know of off the top of my head that we've worked through and mitigated with the local jurisdictions.
If I could interrupt you real quick. So the purpose of this, the new app, which I did get to see the other day, we need to do a good job of getting the PR rolling this out statewide, is for folks to be actively engaged, similar to an airport, right? So after 9/11, we all were very much in tune to see something, in this case, send something or say something, no matter what it is, right? And that would involve the school, and not only them doing harm to others, but certainly to themselves, because we want to make sure these kids are protected no matter what. Is that not?
That's absolutely. So one of the issues we have with the See Something is initially there's some back-end enhancements that we like to make, so that when you go to the app, you can select to report a school threat, or you can select because that you have a mental health issue or you're in a crisis and you're looking for help with suicide prevention. The important thing on that, as you said, Senator, is the marketing, is because we're not having a marketing campaign. Have we seen a billboard on this? Have we seen a PSA on this? And without that, we're not going to engage students to use the app. And if we can't engage students to use the app, we don't have the information, we can't act on the information, we can't do something about the information.
I have one more question over here.
Is,
Go ahead, Gary.
are the tips anonymous on the app?
At this time, they're not. The registration for the account requires the user to enter a username and a phone number. They can enter any information that they want to enter. But that's some of the back-end enhancements we're looking at is if we can start separating this system out to have a specific section or button hotkey to notify us of a school threat. That's something that we're looking at right now. So the marketing is a critical issue for us there, and being able to get that messaging out. Because obviously we talked about 6 bystanders in every incident not reporting anything, but the bigger thing is our target audience is students. They're most likely to see this threat information, and if they don't know how to report it or where to report it, we're not going to get it. We can't do something like
My question is, have you met with the Georgia School Board Superintendents Association at this point?
that. Not yet.
And if you have not, we have Mr. Wilbanks here, who's the guru of state school superintendents, and I would suggest that you get with him and arrange a meeting and get with the school superintendents, and they'll get it down to their local county level, and because that's going to be your best source to get into schools, is if it comes out of the superintendent's office, not from the legislature, but from the people they know that we need to do this, and here's how we're going to do it, and move accordingly, because I think that's going to be a lot faster than billboards or anything like that. So I would recommend that. And thank you for your work on it.
So one of the last things that we deal with on a daily basis with these is, as the information comes out, they're critical threats to life. And a lot of times the information comes from social media, and the turnaround time on that, getting exigent subpoenas and then having to do basically the double paperwork on the back end to get the information to identify the end user and address that threat. And then we have to turn around and do the work, right? And go back to the courts and get that legislation. So something that would approve that is the administrative authority to get those subpoenas. So let's move on to the next slide. One of the big topics that I think you hear constantly from all your committee meetings is we need to improve our physical security at schools. This is every single active shooter incident in school that we've pretty much seen as we face these issues. No locks on doors, too much glass, and those were very apparent in the Parkland incident. The shooter there never entered the classroom, never had to enter the classroom, simply shot through the glass. But on the same token, the shooter there, when he got to the second floor and the students were fleeing the school, he was looking down on the students through a window at the end of the hall and attempted to shoot through it. But because that glass was hurricane rated, the shots deflected and went straight and did not impact students below him. So we've learned a valuable lesson here that when we use ballistic glass in schools, it has an impact on saving lives.
Just real quick, I noticed some people are taking pictures, which you're more than welcome to do. However, this will all be posted online on the website later on if you want to download a copy.
So some of the other incidents that we've seen is hallways and doorways and corridors not being able to be secured. This limits shooters' access to additional places within the school. Most schools in Georgia that I know of or that I've seen don't have that. I know some of the newer ones do. There's no controlled access, or some of the schools don't have controlled access. In other words, they let people come in during passing periods. There's no 911 activation, as I told you, takes 4 to 6 minutes, and most incidents are over in 6 minutes. No trauma kits. When an incident happens, it takes a while for first responders to get into the school and start treating people. And that's something that is very simple, training our faculty and staff to use trauma kits that we can save lives and in the wake of these incidents. And then the other part is that students are most likely to recognize pre-assault indicators. Again, that goes back to reporting and having a system in place and marketing that system. So some of the things that we can do, and I would direct your attention to Chamblee County, Indiana. There's been news stories on the safest school in America. I've had an opportunity to with Director Keenan in D.C., talk with the Chamblee County Sheriff and look at their plans. It's a very, very expensive solution. So what I'd like the panel to know is there's less expensive solutions. If you look at the doors here today, they're outward opening, hinging doors. Simply putting a pin in that hinge would stop that door from opening. That's a low-cost $5 solution to fix the problem and put a lock on a door. But hurricane glass and fixing that problem is a simple solution. Start with high schools. We understand that we can't do every school all at once, or most states can't afford to do that. Our most likely threat are in high schools. The average age for these kids is 15 to 17. It would make the most sense to start there. Limit campus access during passing periods. This is a free solution. It doesn't cost anything to say, hey parents, you can't drop off their lunch that they forgot during a passing period. You can't come into the school during that. And limiting access. We talked about placing trauma kits in schools. Mandatory drills. A lot of schools have safety plans, but they don't practice them. They don't do that regularly. They don't incorporate law enforcement into those drills. Electronic locks on hallways and doors, and then silent and remote 911 activation systems to get them there quickly. Next slide.
How much time is the silent remote E911? How much time does that save?
It reduces the response time. I think law enforcement can get there. Chamblee County, Indiana has tested it, and I think it's around 4.5 minutes when they're arrived on scene. The difference is those systems that they're using, every teacher in the school has it. As soon as they press the button, it locks down all the doors and the corridors, activates 911, turns over the school camera systems to the 911 center so they can see everything that's going on in the school, so that when law enforcement arrives and they can see it in their cars, when they arrive, they know exactly where the shooter is in the school and where they need to go and make entry.
I know you weren't in Lee County when we were down there, but I assume that's similar to they have an app where their
Yes.
teachers can, every
Yes.
teacher has access to that app.
Yes.
That app is geo-fenced, so they know that that teacher's on campus. When they hit that panic, it says panic, and are you sure? When they hit yes, it sends out that distress call. So I assume it's similar to that. I don't recall if there's tied in directly to 911, but I know it definitely it's tied into the main office.
Yes, and so those are free apps that they have. I believe that the system that they have in Chamblee was directly connected to E911, but there are other applications for doing that. So that's a suggestion that we have for improving physical security.
Thank you, Mr. Mossman. You mentioned something a moment ago that has never occurred to me, and you said most schools have drills that don't include the local public safety folks, the law enforcement.
That's correct.
And look, I'm from rural Georgia. We have never had that either. Or for a fire drill, we never had firefighters or fire services show up. And that would be a smart thing to do, because what did we learn after 9/11? Sharing information was a problem, and we need to think about that as we put this together. That we make sure that everybody's talking to each other instead of being silos. So, thank you for pointing that out.
So that actually segues right into my next point, is one of the big things we're big on, and one of the biggest recommendations since 2000, since the President's Commission on School Safety, has been to develop multidisciplinary threat assessment teams. We need to involve, we need to bring, and obviously that's why we're here, educators and law enforcement, mental health people together, our Fusion Center, our EMA together when we're talking about these issues. For a long time, we've gotten better at this. There are some schools and some jurisdictions in our state that are very, very good at this. There are others that aren't so good, and I think it's simply a matter because it hasn't occurred to them. But where I'd like to see school safety go is a multidisciplinary approach where we have a team of professionals, school superintendent, sheriff, our Fusion Center, our EMA personnel, so that when we have a kid that's at risk, and we know they're at risk, that we bring this team together and we say, okay, what can we do about this? How can we help this student? How can we protect our school in advance? We also can use this team to leverage our school safety planning so that when a school and a principal are developing school safety plans, they're doing it in collaboration and partnership with law enforcement so that we know our plans are going to be effective. And they can review and implement these daily. We can also involve them in drills and training for that. Law enforcement can also bring into the table some of this medical training with our partners in EMS and EMA. They can review and address the at-risk students, but the bigger thing is on the back end is when we become aware of this threat, we have a team of individuals in that school already who are familiar with the incident where we can pass that information to them. We can take a comprehensive approach at trying to mitigate these incidents with these students. We know that in Parkland, the shooter was having a lot of issues in his personal life. Not that changes the fact of the outcome or anything like that, but what it is if we have a threat assessment team in place, we can get a safety plan in place that involves law enforcement. Say, hey, do we need to arrest this kid? Do we need to give them other options? Do we need to put extra security at this particular school for this particular student for a period of time? What else can we do? And those are some solutions that these teams can put together. It needs to be mandated if we're going to use these teams. We've seen Virginia and we've seen Indiana write a law. Mike Pence actually wrote Indiana's law several years ago. I believe it was 2014 or 2016 when it went into effect. But in your packet that I gave you, there's a link to Indiana's Department of Education that they have a copy of the law that basically says we're going to use these teams and do periodic reviews on at-risk students and on our safety plans. And then the last thing is, in the state of Georgia, we require police officers and medical professionals and teachers to report child abuse. But we don't mandate them to report school threats. There's no requirement in Georgia law that an educator or a healthcare professional has to report a kid that is threatening to hurt others at school.
Let me ask you a question on that. Would that even include someone getting any type of mental health counseling or a psychologist or psychiatrist?
I think you have to draw a fine line. I think it has to be a school threat. If there's a kid that's indicating that they need help, let's give them help. But at the same token, if they're doing it in such a way that communicates a potential threat to the school, I need to end my life, I'm going to go out and don't come to school tomorrow, things like that, then I think that changes it a little bit. And it's not to say that every time that every kid that's suffering from mental health is going to go to jail. But I think that's where your threat assessment teams come in place, that collaboration that you can work together to say, hey, what do we need to do? Because sometimes our role in law enforcement is to be a mentor and maybe be there for that kid rather than taking them to custody.
I appreciate that. And that's part of our whole prevention thought process is we want to wrap our arms around and help these students and children before something may happen.
Absolutely.
I was just going to say that on that note, there's a new report from the Secret Service that came out right about a month ago that talks about early warning signs that can be picked up in students, and then what do we do about that? How do we connect them to services without completely blowing up their privacy? So that is available publicly online, and I think we're going to be talking about it at one of our meetings.
Absolutely, the FBI, and Rick continued to show me, there's a new one also that the FBI has released on pre-attack indicators. But with that, what it says with that is that you're absolutely right. When we see those indicators, we have to get students and convince the students that they need to report this information and that they can feel safe in reporting it.
And as you can see, Andy's done a lot of study for this and come up and working with other states to see what their best practices are. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you for allowing us to come and present.
Hey, excuse me. Thank you, Director, and thank you for all the work that the GBI does to help us be safer in Georgia. I know the work you do, and I appreciate it. A couple of questions.
Okay.
And, we know that y'all are recommending that we pull the barriers down so that law enforcement and other related public safety officials talk and share information. But do you also think that maybe we need more public safety? I mean, Mr. Mossman said that the response from 911 and law enforcement and the community takes sometimes, I mean, earliest could be 6 minutes, but a lot longer sometimes. And would it be better to have more either public safety officials or law enforcement or on site all the time or part of the school system of some type? I mean, what do you think? Am I putting you on the spot here?
I think that's got to be a local decision. It always works out best when you have school resource officers at a facility, not necessarily routine law enforcement, regular law enforcement, but school resource officers that are specifically trained to work with the school system and with students. That's the best practice.
Brian, I have a couple of questions for you. I've seen the recommendations that you made. Not everybody in the audience has seen them. They're on this presentation. And about funding, to see something, send something, funding physical security measures, things to do with mental health, a state gang task force, some of these things. My question is, have you all put any numbers to any of these recommendations that you have in the back of your presentation? Has that happened yet at that point?
Has not happened yet.
Okay. And the other thing is, since I live in DeKalb County, it's near and dear to my heart. We've had several meetings, and the question I have is about, by the way, we call them learning cottages, you may call them trailers where you live, but all the various trailer cottages that we have throughout, other than a teacher having something that would lock the door, I guess, has there been any discussion about how we deal with these portable units by you all? Because it's different from the main campus. And there's, we've got at least 30 kids and a teacher in one of these units, and when we've got I guess it's a quad, I believe is what it is, I remember right. So we've got a series of classrooms in there. Has there been any discussion about best practices for what we need to do in those areas?
Not specifically, but there needs to be enhanced security, of course. And there's some public safety specialists that would be better suited to talk about how you can harden that specific type of facility or a building. We just know it needs to be hardened.
Director, thank you so much, as well as ASEC Mossman. We appreciate all the great work you do. There is more information, both in the presentation as well as the write-up, which again will be online, but also for the committee members as we begin to formulate our report and recommendations. So thank you so much for your time today. Let's give our folks at GBI a round of applause. Okay, next up, we're going to hear about data quality from Brennan Hartman. Thank you for spending some time with us today. We know that the sharing of information and data is going to be critical as we move forward, and we look forward to seeing your presentation.
Good morning. Thank you, Senator. Thank you so much for having me here. This is a really important conversation among stakeholders in Georgia, and I'm glad to be able to contribute in some way. And I have to mention, since it was mentioned by name, that I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee, so I'm glad to have a neighbor on the panel. So I'm invited here today to talk a little bit about some considerations if you wanted to use data, use education data as part of your strategy for ensuring that all students are safe at school. So if we could just go to the next slide, I always like to kick off, when we hear the word data, education data, we go to systems, we go to technology, and I just like to ground conversations with data, and I think the reason all of you are here is because of students. That the point of this is really to keep students at the center. It's not about necessarily building systems or data collection, but really to support student success. Next slide, thank you. Part of student success is feeling and being safe in school. And using data ethically and effectively can support student learning and also create a school environment that is conducive to student success, including safety. And all of you as leaders concerned about education, I'm sure that you use data all the time because it helps you answer important questions across the field about whether students are graduating on time, whether they have the resources that you need. And now you're really grappling with these newer questions about how do we keep students safe. But a lot of the most important questions that you have, including this question about school safety, requires data from multiple agencies. Senator said it well before that when information lives in silos, we don't all have what we need. So particularly when it comes to safety, but also supporting students' learning, information not only from K-12, but also maybe health, juvenile justice, other sources is critically important, and multiple adults in students' lives need to have access to the information appropriate to their role. We're not talking about giving everyone everything about students, but really the information they need to do their job to support students. Data sitting in silos, as it often does now, just won't answer the questions that we have. It won't inform the actions that we need to take. So you as leaders can think about policies and practices that will help connect and link data to develop a fuller picture of students' lives, so that you can in turn answer the more complex questions with which you are faced. So the solutions and challenges are the same no matter if we're talking about promoting school safety or preventing students from dropping out or trying to improve outcomes for highly mobile students who maybe move around from school to school. You all must have a mechanism to allow agencies in the state of Georgia to safely share protected student information by setting up appropriate governance structures that will oversee how data is being used to answer your questions and inform action. So often, the biggest miscommunications, which is the thing that often most things in the way when it comes to data sharing, aren't because we don't have the information or that it doesn't exist, but because the systems and mechanisms aren't quite in place yet. You run into a lot of turf, well, that's my data, I don't understand why I should be sharing it with this person, and that is the kind of stuff that prevents it from being linked and ultimately helping us take action. But as you can see here, big bold letter, this is also more than just a technical enterprise. You may find that there's some technical work that needs to be done, whether that be collecting new information, linking systems that aren't linked together yet. But ultimately the goal is to make the conditions and the culture possible that allow for the sharing of data and meaningful conversations about data among the adults in students' lives. And I will say, you may have some of the technical infrastructure that you need in place. Georgia is hands down a leader, maybe the leader when it comes to education data. You have really strong systems, you have great leaders within your agencies. And I encourage you that you talk to your agency data leaders to start getting that sense of, what do we have? Here are the questions that I'm grappling with. What might we have already that can help us think through that? And what's missing? What don't we have yet? So as you go forward with this, there's 4 things that I'd like you to just keep forefront of your mind. Foremost on the next slide is that data should be used to further and support student success, period. First, do no harm, basically. Students have to be kept at the center. I recommend you check out studentdataprinciples.org. It's a list of 10 guiding beliefs about how we should use information about students. And number 1 and foremost among these is that there should all be all about supporting student success. And I think that's really the goal you have in mind when you're talking about supporting student safety. But the reason this is number 1 is because how we use information about our kids can be kind of scary sometimes. What are you going to do with that data? Who's going to have access to it? So really keeping that eye on the prize that this is about supporting student success, never to be used to their detriment. Next, data alone does not drive action. It's important, it's a critical tool, we need it. You heard great information from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation on that same note, but it's really about the people. Who needs access to it? What kind of questions should they be empowered to ask? So before you start collecting data and linking data, you need to have a clear idea of who's going to act on it, how you're going to act on it, and what type of responses it should trigger. You can find trends and patterns, but then people need to make meaning from that information. Third, and really in the same vein, on the next slide, is that before data can come together, people have to come together. You heard me mention a little at the beginning that a lot of times the problems with data sharing, it can be technical solutions, it can be that the data lives in silos, but it can also be this turf thing. This is my information, I don't understand why you need it. And so you all as state leaders have and as state lawmakers, have the unique and fun task of finding the right incentives, the right mechanisms to get people at the state level to come together. And that is such a vital precursor to getting this data to talk to each other, to getting people the information they need. It is often, unfortunately, the people issues that stand in the way. Excuse me. And next, and finally, just among my considerations is that people will not use data unless they trust and value it. I think it's so wonderful that you're already having these meaningful stakeholder conversations across the state with parents, educators, and students, and that's going to have to continue, particularly if it's something as sensitive as using students' information to help prevent violence or danger, to promote safety. People are going to need to trust this information. And I'll just, you all mentioned at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation this concept of early warning. That's something that we talk about in education as well, early warning systems. It often means a tool that helps us keep students from falling off track, from dropping out. But it can also be used as a tool that more comprehensively supports student success, however you will choose to define it, including keeping students safe. And it requires linked data, and it also requires adults, including educators in students' life, who know how to act on that information. Going on, so long term, you can consider how to use data to foster a safe learning environment. I just mentioned an early warning system that can answer how we predict outcomes so that we can either support students. I love that you already mentioned the goal of let's help kids that need help, or intervene where that's necessary. But I'll say if we only see linked data as valuable for a one-off use, this is the system that does this one thing, it'll continue to live in a silo. We'll miss the greater potential of using data to enhance how we're meeting all students' needs. So going on to the next slide, I have a few just slightly more direct considerations for you, a list of steps, if you will. So one is start with your questions. This is what we always say. People often want to go down to, well, I want to collect the data about this. What's really critical is to start with, I want to be able to answer this question about students in the state of Georgia. Getting broad buy-in from the stakeholders that you're meeting with across the state about what those questions should be, that should drive the data that you're collecting and using.
Speaking of questions,
Yes, sir.
I understand, with the student longitudinal data system, I've been involved from the beginning on that, or we're going K through 12, and we put the child's strengths and weaknesses. Theoretically, the child goes to school unfortunately, out of summer, some of us think, goes to school in the summer, and the teacher's been given this information for strengths and weaknesses from an academic standpoint. Give me some examples, if you can, of questions that link particularly to what this topic, i.e. the school safety. I understand the achievement thing, strengths, weaknesses, etc. Can you give me some examples of some of the questions we should be thinking about and asking, I guess, in order to link it to the school safety?
Yeah, I think it would be great to talk to someone who's a little bit more expert on student behavior, and you've heard a lot about the student boarding indicators. But there's other information that many states and cities are starting to pull in side by side with this academic information, and attendance and chronically absence is a huge one. They're often signifiers of something else going on in that kid's life.
Right.
Yep, welcome, thank you.
Could I just make a comment? I 100% agree with you about the, how we all have to work together and collaborate, because I'm new to state government, and what I learned down there is that we have a lot of silos down there, and we've got to find a way to get around that. The state actually got a grant from the University of Pennsylvania this year to work on data sharing between some of the agencies. We had legislation on that didn't quite get through the system, but I think it's very clear that we need to revisit that. Thank you.
I think that's great. Yes,
All
sir.
right, and Ms. Parton, again, thank you for your information so far. Something you haven't said, and I want to make sure that we discuss, is the sad events that happened in Florida were a classic example of no data sharing, from DFACS to the local sheriff's department, to school counselors, to school administrators, to teachers, to the FBI monitoring social media accounts, to students making complaints. There was a whole thread that had gone on for over a year. And having put this stuff into place, we could have done a better job with that. And that's why data is so critical, and it's part of our agenda today.
And I think kind of marrying your two comments, in a lot of ways, we really are asking the system to do something that it hasn't done before. So there's a little bit of a mind shift and a paradigm shift, particularly at that state agency level, to collaborate and work together on data, on trying to get real-time data, on trying to get the most meaningful, valuable data that you can. And one of the ways that you all, as legislators, can consider tackling this is establishing sound governance policies that dictate how the data will be managed and by whom. Where does the buck stop on this information? Who is accountable for making sure that we all do sit at the table and share the information that we might get rid of the truth? I have not seen a state yet address school safety on one of those bodies, but it doesn't mean that you couldn't be on the cutting edge of thinking about it in that way. Next, and critical, is ensure students' privacy is a priority. Yes, we need to share. Yes, we need to make sure that adults and students' lives have the information that we need, and we also need to protect students' privacy. In the state of Georgia, you passed a pretty comprehensive student data privacy bill about, I think, 3 years back. I recommend taking a look at it, see what it already does for you, and maybe where you could build on that policy. Next, and I said this at the top, but also determine a clear plan for how the data will be acted on. You shouldn't collect and link and then just kind of hope the data wanders out and gets into the people that it needs. Just in the same way that you need to start with the questions that you need to answer, you should start with, here's some of the things that we want to be sure happen as a result. And again, broad stakeholder engagement, ongoing stakeholder engagement will not only help you get to a better solution, but will also foster trust and buy-in in the solutions that you're seeking. With that, I believe I'm finished.
Any additional questions?
So are you suggesting, I think I finally understand what you're trying to say, is that we already have a large amount of data on student achievement, but you're suggesting we also take data from other agencies and other people that are dealing with students, whether it's in other issues that they're dealing with, other than just particularly achievement, we combine that together, then we will hopefully be able to come up with better outcomes, and we can prevent by predicting behavior. Is that what you're?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I think, and also just support students' learning, support student success better by bringing all the data together about them that's out there. Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you. Please give her a round of applause. Okay, next up, someone who probably needs no introduction in Georgia for education from Gwinnett County. We have Superintendent Wilbanks as well as Assistant Superintendent Flint. If you gentlemen would come up, we'll get your presentation going.
Senator Albert, I'm going to let Dr. Flint do the presentation. I'll be available for questions.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Every day.
Chairman, committee members,
members, let me first thank you for having this forum and inviting us to speak. I also appreciate the other comments that individuals have made. We've done a lot of work in Georgia and made a lot of progress, but we all know we have a long way to go. And I'm here to talk a little bit about what we do in Gwinnett County Public Schools. And I'll go through this presentation, but as you have questions, please let me know. To start out, I really think that from discipline to safety and security, you need to have an overall plan, and that needs to start with your Board of Education. And our Board of Education has done this, and they've done it for many years. Our board has a set of core beliefs and commitments, and part of that I have on the board for you. So, to provide a safe and secure learning environment, change class. And to optimize the school effect to have a positive impact on every child. And as I go through this, and I have some other information, we link back to this in Gwinnett County Public Schools in the work that we do. And so when we talk about alignment, and I heard this from the GBI as well, in the state of Georgia, we need to work on some alignment. And in the school systems, we're very focused on this. But I think we need to continue to watch that because the direction of your school system really impacts what happens all the way down into the classroom. On the next slide, you'll see we have strategic goals in Gwinnett County Public Schools that come from the board. And one of those strategic goals is to ensure a safe, secure, and orderly environment for all. And these have been in place for many, many years, although it looks a little different today than it did 20 years ago. Let me give you a little bit of facts about Gwinnett County Public Schools. We are a suburb just north of Atlanta. We're about 437 square miles. We're approaching 1 million residents in Gwinnett County, and we're currently the largest school system in Georgia. We're the 12th largest in the nation. We have large schools. We have 140 schools total, 22 high schools, 29 middle, 80 elementary schools, and 9 specialty schools. We're nearing 180,000 students. And so obviously, with these numbers, school safety has been at the forefront of many of the decisions we've made for many years. But as I mentioned, that's changed over the last couple of years, and you'll see that as I get into the presentation. As we heard from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, there's a number of different areas that we need to look at when it comes to school safety. And I'll do this by talking a little bit about the personnel that we currently have. To kind of put it in perspective, in 2008, we had 16 what we call school resource officers. And currently we have 89. Our school resource officers are sworn police officers. They are post-certified. The overall department houses over 100 people. And so a large working part of the organization. And we've added a lot of resources over the years. First and foremost, they are police officers. They do carry all the range of their levels of force. However, we do a lot of training. They are required to have experience outside as a working police officer, and so we hire them from outside of the school system where they've had experience. They are asked to be mentors. They're asked to be resource type officers for our students. We ask them to develop relationships, not only with teachers and students and administrators, but also the community. We know that our SROs are possibly the first police officer students are going to encounter, and we want to have a very good relationship there within the local school. And so with that, we get a lot of information from students, and we want them to come talk to not only our teachers and administrators, but also our police officers. So it's not just about having the police officers in the schools. There's a large component to safety and security, and we'll see that in other personnel. So mental health support. We have 21 social workers, 380 counselors, 57 psychologists, Physical wellness is an important concept here. We have 13 registered nurses that work for the entire county and 139 clinic workers. Also, we can't separate student behavior and intervention. If you look at our vision and our mission, we talk about not only academic knowledge and skills, because that's our core business, but we talk about behavior of students. And so those three are tied together inexplicably. And through our Department of Student Behavior and Intervention, we provide a lot of resources to that. So we have 5 full-time hearing officers, 14 certified district hearing officers for when students actually need to go to a discipline panel, but that's a very small percentage of overall student population. They also provide a lot of resources for our local schools, and I heard a little bit about reporting. We do have set reporting requirements in Gwinnett County Public Schools, and that goes through our Office of Student Behavior and Intervention as well as school resource officers. So it comes together where hopefully we'll get 2 reports if there is a difficult situation where students are involved in. So next slide. I heard a little bit about equipment and facilities, and we have increased in these areas. As you may have heard, Gwinnett County government, with their last SLOSS, dedicated about $5 million. And of course, with many of our resources, we've dedicated a good many funds. And then let me thank you, because as you know, the school safety grant, which was I think around $16 million total, we used about $1.2 million of that for many of these areas that I'm going to talk about. First, let me go back to that. Let me just talk through these real quickly. The EMS system is linked to local law enforcement. So all of our local agencies have access to this. When this is activated, as was mentioned, they have access to all of our cameras. They have access to get into the school and know how to go into the school at what locations. There is a lot of collaboration that goes on in Gwinnett County Public Schools with our local law enforcement officers. We believe that that is a very important part of the training and exercises that we do. The visitor management system, we started this a couple of years ago, and with that school safety grant, we're continuing to add to this. By the end of this semester, every one of our 140 schools will have this installed. And so that is a buzz-in type system at the front door and other doors throughout the school. So it limits access into the school. And then we've changed student behavior and student modes of transportation throughout the school to comply with the need for the visitor management system. We also have a local alert button. There are many times you need to activate an emergency action type plan without the need for an overall emergency action from local law enforcement. And so that allows us to do that within the school prior to escalating it to maybe a large scale emergency situation. And then also, we've heard about with the Hurricane Florence, the need for weather radios. We monitor this at the district level, but we also monitor it and require that in the local school. Seems like any time we have a weather emergency, it's right when the bell rings and the buses are showing up. So it's always interesting how that happens. Just some other things to maybe think about as we talk about the needs. Cameras are important for us, but typically that captures behavior that has happened. We do monitor some of those, but with over 9,000 cameras throughout the system, that's obviously too many to monitor on an ongoing basis, but provides us an opportunity to go back and see things that have happened. Our school resource officers monitor all of our facilities and maintain jurisdiction over our facilities. However, we have an agreement with local law enforcement where that jurisdiction will adjust depending on the level of the crisis. And I heard y'all mention that. We believe that's very important as well. We monitor all our own burglar alarms, fire alarms. We have a 24/7 operation. We have not only daytime SROs, but we also have ones that work 24 hours over the nighttime. We have found over the last year or so an increase in the level of social media threats, and those evening officers have really been able to apply their skills in working through that and making some home visits when necessary, so we can make sure that threat doesn't continue on until school starts the next morning. A little bit about communications. Obviously, communications is of vital importance, especially in the time of an emergency. Our police department has police radios, and those are also connected with all of our local law enforcement divisions as well. So at any time, they can communicate back and forth with the larger departments within the district. In addition, we need to be able to communicate with parents and students. And so we have implemented something called School Messenger, and that allows us to text, it allows us to call, it allows us to send messages out. We can do it at the district level in case of a large-scale emergency. We can also do it all the way at the local school or individual classroom level. I'd also mention at the local school some of the call buttons that we have and the need for radios within a school, because many times in some areas of our schools, we don't have the ability to use cell phones because of the limited signal. It's just not in school that we need to be worried about. We also need to be worried about transportation and our buses and students driving to school, parking at school, and parent drop-off. I'll just mention that we have a clear focus on that. Obviously, that's a large-scale effort with almost 2,000 buses. We do have about 300 cameras that allow for some safety for stop arm violators. And we also have radios equipped in every one of our buses for quick communication when needed. A little bit about training and initiatives, and we have heard this from many of our colleagues today. I think we all in the school systems take this very seriously, but there's really 3 areas you have to look at. You have to look at not only planning up front, but you have to practice that planning, and then you have to revise that plan when it didn't work quite that well, or when you notice something that didn't work as well. And so that is the Plan, Do, Check, Act way that we look at this. We do have a lot of emergency planning. We do provide emergency drills, not only the required ones at the state level, but also local ones. I heard a little bit of one of our colleagues talking about trauma kits. I would say thank you to the Department of Education and others who helped us with Stop the Bleed program, which almost all of our schools, they will all be a certified Stop the Bleed school by the end of this semester, but those provide trauma kits to place throughout the school to help stop bleeding. Also, bullying and harassment, first aid, CPR, AED use, we provide this in all of our schools, and it is a requirement. I would also mention another partnership that the Georgia Department of Education has promoted for many years now, and we're going to hear a little bit about from one of our teachers that's going to talk, so I won't go into this in detail, but positive behavior interventions and support has been successful. Currently, 97 of our schools use this. We're seeing a lot of success, and we're continuing to increase the number of schools that use PBIS. Just a couple of ideas around new and future initiatives is if you'll look down at the lower right-hand side of the screen, we have branded this discussion and call it Safe, Secure, Successful Schools in Gwinnett County Public Schools. And this allows us to put a brand on a lot of things we're talking about. And hopefully this is well discussed and well communicated throughout our schools. And it is used. You'll see it many places. Secondly, the cross-divisional work. I heard a little bit about kind of turf and not wanting people to kind of come in to your area. You know, this is something that we have to work on a daily basis. But I think when it comes to safety, the more information and the sharing of that information, when appropriate, is definitely necessary. The CEOT team is a team that we've had in place for a large-scale emergency for a couple of years. We have a number of meeting locations depending on the level of the emergency, but this provides executive level leadership to make some very quick decisions in the case of a large-scale emergency, and that provides a process around how we do that in Gwinnett County Public Schools. Community partnerships, we also have heard this with many of our colleagues, and I would say this is something we need to continue to work on. We have a lot of great partnerships across the state of Georgia and across Gwinnett County Public Schools. From mental health and our work with suicide prevention, our work with the different organizations from DFACS all the way to Viewpoint Health. We have a lot of partners in this, as well as local medical providers. We are a part of the Georgia Apex Project. We have trainers for youth mental health first aid located in the district, and they provide training across the district to counselors and advisors of students. We participate in KidsNet, which has been an excellent program, as well as a focus on social and emotional learning. I could go through probably a list of 100 agencies. We really don't have time to do that, but I do think there's a need to have collaboration and have some things put in place across the system, so the school system isn't left with all the responsibility, especially as it comes to mental health. Really getting some of the experts that can help us with that. I would mention when we heard from Brendan a few minutes ago on data quality, we have a system in Gwinnett County Public Schools that we use called ABC reports. It's an early warning indicator for students that provides information for teachers and advisors and counselors. We call it ABC reports because it provides information on attendance, behavior, and course performance. And so we, through the research with Johns Hopkins University, we looked at that, and those three things can come together and give you a lot of information at a timely manner on an individual student. And so providing that information when one of those areas is highlighted or it drops, you have a bad grade or 2 bad grades, you have an infraction for a disciplinary involvement, something happens with a student, we try to make sure that notifies key individuals in that student's life where they can take some action and get involved. And so I applaud her for bringing that up. We've been using that for the last 6 years and found it very successful. So that concludes the presentation. We do have, I'll be happy to answer questions, but we do also have a student, parent, and teacher, and I'm really looking forward to their comments as well.
Dr. Flint, first off, let me say thank you for your service to Gwinnett County as well as the presentation today. It's clear Gwinnett is leading in many areas. My question, and I know we have several other questions, are other school systems coming to you in order to learn from you and model some of those best practices?
Well, I would say we learn from each other. Many of our colleagues in nearby districts, as well as districts in other states, work together. We share information frequently, and we try to share the best practices. We're open to doing that, as well as I know many of our colleagues in other districts are, and we appreciate that.
Well, since you won't brag on you, I will. You know, you've twice been Urban School District of the Year in the nation, which is quite an accolade to the Gwinnett County system. I want to make sure everybody understands that 10% of the children in this state that are in public school go to school in Gwinnett County. 10%. They've been leaders, whether a principal training academy, I can go on and on with several things. But now here comes the kicker, because here comes my question. We've heard recently, I'm going to say probably in the last year it's become more prevalent, talks about there's a big increase in gangs. And I figure with 10% of the kids in public school in your schools, my question is, what's your experience with that? And Vernon, I could have asked you all this question as well. It's not just in the urban areas, I understand that, but I do think it's prevalent, and it crosses all races. Okay, it's not any one particular group or anything like that, but I just wonder what you're seeing, what we need to be considering, because this seems to be a problem that continues to grow. So I'll be curious for your comments on that.
Thank you for the question. It is a focus that we've had for a number of years. You'll remember it was probably 10 to 12 years ago when this really came to the forefront. And as we hired SROs, we started hiring people who had a background in working with gangs. Through that, we developed a training protocol not only for our SROs, but also for our discipline contacts within the schools. And we provide an update annually on gang behavior. And the reason that is so important is because when you see a little bit of that, whether it's a clothing or color or some signs of that within the local school, we take a very hard stance on that, and we approach it very quickly and with our discipline procedures within the county. I would say because of that, we've seen fluctuations across the years. Our numbers are down. I wouldn't be able to speak to that in the state of Georgia as far as the number of gang activity, but I think students get the very clear picture that if they're going to participate in that, they're not going to do it in a local school or not show their symbols or signs, because we take a very hard stance on it very quickly.
Can I ask you if you could provide the materials, can you provide the materials that you all have got this particular subject to this committee? Would it be appropriate? Could you do that?
Sure, what's appropriate, we will.
Thank you.
Be happy to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. Lynette's always been very good to work with and always on the forefront, and I appreciate your leadership. And at Wilbanks as well, your leadership as well, and also for always having your doors open when I have a question and concerns, particularly when there are difficult times in our country. So the question I had, and I'm glad you included it, was the community partnerships. I did a little math up here. You know, it looks like we have a lot of counselors, 380 counselors, but when you divide that out, over 180, almost 180,000 students, that's a ratio of about 1 to every 473 students. So I assume they're pretty overworked at times. What are we doing with our community partners as far as giving some additional support to those counselors, whether it be through mentorship, helping identify maybe at-risk children? Because as the GBI said before, I mean, once something's going on, we don't want to get to that point. We really need to be focusing on prevention. That's the best way to do this. Are we working with our community partners to kind of help in those things to give these children, particularly the ones that need that additional, I'm rambling now, I know, that additional support? Are we working with those to kind of assist in those issues?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and let me also thank you for always calling and asking some questions, Senator Martin. You've been frequently reaching out and getting our kind of how we see some things, and it's good to kind of triangulate these answers some of the time. I appreciate you reaching out, as well as others of you that have reached out in the past. There's a lot of answers, I think, on that one. I would say, first and foremost, our 21C3 and the training program that we put our counselors through on an annual basis is very robust, and it does look at community partnerships and ask them to be a part of that. But I do think we need to be very careful that everybody in the school has a responsibility, from students, teachers, custodians, school food nutrition workers, and we do that through an advisement program. We ask all of our teachers to be advisors to students, and that looks different at different levels. And so, I think there is a level at which we do need to make individuals responsible, especially when it comes to roles and responsibilities, and I think we do that with counselors. But as far as see something, say something, and noticing differences in students and reporting that to people who can help, I think we all are a large part of that, and that's a continued amount of training and effort and communication across the district. It's not something that escapes us, but it is something that's hard to provide enough training for and enough communication. You constantly find areas where you have gaps.
Yeah, comment and question, and the comment is to Senator Martin's point. Don't forget about the school nurses. They play a key role in augmenting what the counselors do, and they have the opportunity many times to get information that nobody else can get. And then the question is, on your CIOT team, your Central Emergency Operations team, is that just school district folks, or is that including law enforcement?
It starts out with our school district, because that would be the first level of response we would have. We do have another team that would be our overall countywide EAS system. We practice with the EAS system, with the county, with GEMA, Homeland Security. We actually get trained, most of our training through those areas. A lot of that flows through, but we also take advantage of the training with the GBI and the FBI. We have a number of individuals that go through many of their courses every year.
Thank you. Mr. Lane, thank you for your presentation too. In my area, there are generally poor systems up there in northwest corner of Georgia. And I don't want to get you in trouble, Mr. Wilbanks may want to answer this one. But what do you think about using some of your eSPLOS for school safety? For example, for security equipment, training, resource officers, or et cetera. And this would be on it'd have to be a constitutional ballot that would say may be used, a certain percent may be used for school safety. What do you
Well,
think?
I could just say in Gwinnett County Public Schools, we, being a growing system, obviously we need what we're receiving from eSPLOS and more just for the building needs. I could see how other school districts may need that for other areas if they weren't growing or didn't have capital improvement areas. But we have so many capital improvement areas to keep our hands full with not only eSPLOS, but
You could see that would work for some schools.
I could see that.
It wouldn't be a requirement, it'd be a may, not a shall kind of thing. Okay.
Any other questions? Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you, Dr. Before we begin the next part for some testimony, I do want to recognize some of the folks that are here today. I won't name them all individually, but in order to put these meetings together and to support, we have representation here from our Lieutenant Governor's office, from our Senate Majority Leader's office, our Senate Press office, which is live streaming this and putting all the data online for us. We have our Senate Research office, and last but certainly not least is Ms. Samantha Nix behind me, who is in my office, who's done a great job. So please give them a round of applause. As we begin the next segment, it's always important that we listen. I always remind people of these meetings that when I was a young man in Sunday school, my teacher said, "John, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, so we can listen." And we know some of the greatest ideas will come from those who are here every day. And we want to make sure that we continue to hear from them both today, as well as, again, online or through one of the feedback forums that we have. I'm a father as well. Both of my boys have come through Fulton County Schools. My younger one is a junior at Roswell High School right now. So I understand. And students have responsibilities. They have responsibility to the other students in the school around them, to be a kind and compassionate person, to be that hero to that other student when they're the one that might be ostracized or left out by themselves. Parents have responsibilities. We all have responsibilities. I love my boys. I remind them often, I'm their father, not their friend. This phone that my 16-year-old has is not his. It's mine. I have the passwords. I know what's on social media, and I know how he communicates. And we need each individual area to take that responsibility to be good stewards of our families and ultimately our schools. So I'm very excited that we're going to hear today from a couple of folks I got to meet earlier but talk to yesterday. So I'm going to welcome back up, first and foremost, our cadet lieutenant colonel with the JROTC program, Ms. Sky Williams. Please welcome her.
Are we supposed to salute?
Good morning, Senator Albers and committee. My name is Sky Williams again, and I'm a senior at South Gwinnett High School. And I am the battalion commander for over 220 cadets in the South Gwinnett JROTC program. And I am one out of 180,000 students in the Gwinnett County School District. My goal here is to reiterate and stress the importance of this committee's goal. Senator Albers, you and your committee, you have done and have led this team and taken the initiative very seriously. I do commend that. You have traveled across this country, this peach state, and sitting down with the scores of educational leaders to listen and to engage them in dialogue on ways to ensure that the educational environment are as safe as possible. I'm grateful that there's a committee in place who is intentionally focused in working on ways to create and implement a comprehensive system of safety for our most valuable commodity. Our most valuable commodity here in the state of Georgia is not the Coca-Cola factory or the Lansing station. It's the students. But it's in the life and the well-being of yours truly, myself, and the 1.7 million children who are students in this Gwinnett Public Schools, as well as Georgia Public Schools. Committee, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the Georgia students everywhere for embracing this task head on, and with the brevity and intensity the subject desires and deserves. Our safety truly lies in your hands. Creation of a successful end product for this initiative will mean that the Georgia students will continue to enjoy safe school environments. In closing, I'd like to leave you with this, my own philosophy on life. In life, you're given two options. One, become a thermometer and let the environment change you, or two, become a thermostat and you manually change your environment for the better. And thank you for advance, Senator Albert's committee, for being that thermostat and changing our environment in schools and providing school safety. Are there any questions?
First of all, thank you for being here, and thank you for your comments. We talked a little bit about the app that the students could use in order to communicate about their peers, and they see some behavior that's unusual, etc. In your opinion, and this is your opinion, do you think it would be helpful, and I believe it would, but I just want to know what you think, if we can make this device so that it's an anonymous tip? Do you think more students would take advantage of this if they knew that they weren't going to be the one that said, well, I said this person, this or that or the other? I just wanted your thoughts as a student.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're completely right. And as a student, I feel that if students, we need to get rid of this mantra of it's wrong to tell them something. A lot of students are afraid or maybe be tended to tell somebody, tell the higher authority, tell the administrator something's going on. They're saying, oh, somebody's going to talk about me, somebody's going to feel this type of way if I say something about it. But we need to completely enforce it. To see something, say something. This mantra. We need to, if it was anonymous, like you said, of course a lot more students will be more ample and more willing to actually report something if they see something. So I do support that. I do believe it should be said out, sir.
Thank you very much.
Scott, thank you so much for your comments. Started to wonder if you were thinking about going into the ministry, because you did preach a little bit there. No, I appreciate I wanted just to point out, just thank you for the comment. I agree, the most important commodity is our students, and also our people. I think it's easy as legislators, when you're in Atlanta, there's a lot of issues we deal with. It's easy to forget about the people we represent. And I appreciate that reminder, because it is the people that are most important and the most precious commodity that we have in this state. And thank you for your service as JROTC, and I look forward to what you want to do. I'm very impressed. Thanks.
Thank you.
Sky, just let me conclude by saying thank you. You made JRTC, your parents, your school, and your fellow students very proud. And I will tell you, the future is bright with people like yourself, and we'll be watching your career with great interest. Let's give her a round of applause. And now we get to hear from a very proud mama, I believe. We'll hear from Miss Alexis Williams. It's going to be a hard act to follow, as warning in advance.
I do agree, and I truly am a proud mama, and so is her dad. Good morning, and a terrific Tuesday to each and every one of you here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 is the number of children that my husband and I have. We have 4 girls and 2 boys, and all of which have gone through the Gwinnett County Public Schools. And we have 1 child that's graduated at GSU now, but 5 remain in Gwinnett County schools. And so I'm coming to you from a concerned parent perspective. I do support SR 935, yes, for its purpose, but also for its timing. The reality of the world that we live in is that there is always a present need to keep safety and security at the forefront of our conversations when we're dealing with keeping our students safe. And in that light, there are about 3 or 4 areas that I would like to quickly offer as consideration that deal with prevention and the best practices. Okay, so one, I would suggest a risk assessment going forward. When you do your compilation, I would suggest that perhaps there be a risk assessment required for across the board to see where organizations stand, where schools stand, and what areas we need to improve in. And then I would suggest a transparency model when rolling out any new initiatives, or suggest rolling out under a transparency model where the students, the parents, and the teachers are all fully abreast of each step of the process and the purpose behind it. And they also feel welcome to provide input into that system. I think that when everyone is on board and they feel invested, I think that it will just lend to a very good end. Next, I would suggest an increased active shooter drills and safety drills. And I know a number of counties are already doing this, and I applaud what Gwinnett County is doing. I would also just add that increase into the practices of these drills. And finally, I would also concur with what I've heard earlier today, the anonymous tip hotlines. I understand what we have heard from the GEI about what's already in place, and I think if we can tweak it to enable that anonymous option, I think that would certainly benefit in the area of prevention mechanism, because it provides that tool for school communities such as these students and teachers and parents to report concerns about troubled students that they observe. Sky has shared that they're the front line, the students are the front lines, they're the first ones oftentimes to observe aberrant behavior, and if they're able to have a mechanism to report that behavior. And I also echo what the concept she shared about a campaign to encourage students to feel okay about sharing that information. I think that that would help the increased utilization of these types of anonymous tools. And the question was posed, what can you do to aid in this process? Well, I would like to report that I am one of a number of parents and a growing number of community leaders and students that meet the first Tuesday of every single month. We've been doing this for the last 3 years. Our sole purpose in these meetings is to pray for the protection of our schools. We pray for our teachers, we pray for our staff members, our administrators, our officers, and our students. And we do this every month. And prayer does work. And I will continue to pray and continue to keep safety and security as a focal point and commit to staying with this process, as you suggested earlier, until completion. In closing, King Solomon, the wisest man that ever lived, he said in Proverbs, in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. And as you, Senator Albers and the committee, as you sit in auditoriums like this one across the state listening and having conversations with a multitude of counselors to develop a system of safety for our children, I'm encouraged that your end product will be one that highlights the best advice that you receive and makes the most sense for all and produces an even sturdier environment of safety and security for our children. So I thank you, and may God bless your endeavors.
I guess we know where your daughter gets it.
I was just going to say, wow, that was fantastic. Let's give her a round of applause, please. Thank you, Mrs. Williams. There might be a question here or a comment, Senator.
Well, I guess I was just going to say, you might think by going to the ministry, you definitely preached.
That's outstanding. Well done. Okay. Next up, we're going to hear from a teacher from Meadow Creek High School, and I'm going to try not to mess up your name, Mr. Chad Charnow.
Perfect. Mr. Chairman, committee members, thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of a teacher's perspective, specifically from Gwinnett County, specifically from Meadow Creek High School. Currently, I'm serving as the PBIS coach at Meadow Creek High School. Again, it's Positive Behavior Intervention Supports and the Attendance Coordinator. At Meadow Creek High School, what PBIS looks like is a behavior framework. So it allows teachers to model expected behaviors and allows us to explicitly teach and reteach students expected behaviors. But it allows us to support our students so they're college and career ready. So this proactive support specifically utilizes positive reinforcement through systematic praise. And at Meadow Creek High School, we've seen dramatic decreases in discipline, increases in attendance as well. We roll out PBIS specifically through Mustang Pride at Meadow Creek High School, but that's our avenue where teachers can create and foster relationships with students. And I continue to say creating relationships with students because I think that's the number one prevention or preventative measure that us teachers can do. It creates meaningful relationships with adults in the building, and working with students to create goal-setting abilities. Specifically, we utilize SMART goals. SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound goals. But as we teach students to goal set, specifically in the school setting, it also allows them to self-manage their personal goals as well. I also want to note that I continue to hear the importance of an anonymous text or call line, and I just want to note that Gwinnett County, from my understanding, we have implemented that as well, and utilizing it with fidelity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you putting yourself forward and being educated. Are there questions from the committee members? That was so good, there were no questions. Well done. Thank you. Okay, next up, please welcome Wesley McCall. He's the Deputy Chief of Public Safety for the City of Alpharetta, where they're doing some great things, and look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for coming, Chief.
Give me 1 second to try to get organized here.
The presentation up right now.
Perfect. Well, good morning, Senator Albers and committee. Thank you for allowing me to come and speak this morning. I love to hear the testimony from the student, the parent, and the teachers, because they are the reason why I'm here and what I do every day in Alpharetta. And so we're going to put this presentation up on the board. I'm going to talk a little bit about a program that we've implemented in the city of Alpharetta. A little bit about myself. Started as a firefighter back in 1998 in the city of Alpharetta. And then in 2006, the city consolidated and made a public safety department. And when they did that, they brought police, fire, and 911 together. So I got introduced into the law enforcement side. And today, 12 years later, I am still trying to get police officers and firefighters and 911 operators to work together as the deputy chief. But we're doing a really good job. We have about over 260 employees. So we have some exciting things going on. One of the things, and it's not on the screen. I don't want to consider this as a presentation, more of a conversation, just talking about what we're doing. So at any time, please interrupt me and talk about what's going on. And we're going to flip back and forth between just a couple of screenshots and then the packet I gave you. And for the audience, I'll do my best to try to describe what's going on with the in the package. One of my jobs as a leader in public safety, and actually I meant to say that I am actually the sole candidate for the Forsyth County Board of Education going into my first election. So I serve the board up there in Forsyth County. So school safety is my #1 passion all around, and so I'm blessed to be able to look at it from 2 different perspectives. One of our jobs is, as leaders in public safety, is to look at trends, what's going on. And in 2010, we sat down and started looking at mass shootings. Not just mass shootings in schools, but also in churches, movie theaters, and large group gatherings. And there were 2 things that we found as a committee talking, and one is that a lot of times, majority of the times, the threat eliminated itself when they were confronted within 5 minutes. And then the other thing we started looking at is our, just the one with the tier program, if that works. Just one back. The other thing we found is that with our response, what was happening is we had an active shooter response, is that the police department went first, then the medics, and then the medics sat around and waited until the police department cleared the building. And we knew that there was a time is, a strength when it comes to life safety issues, and there's the golden hour. And we were missing an opportunity. So we went to our police officers and we said, look, we understand that our protocols right now is when you respond to a call is that you need to stage and wait for a team to arrive before you go in there. What we're finding is that most of the times the threat eliminates itself when it's confronted. So we changed our tactics and did a little bit more training where our first arriving officer now is our engaging officer, where they go in right away. They don't wait for other backups. They go and engage. They know backups coming. They all have trained together. They know what they're doing. We also went to the medics and our firefighters and we said, hey, you're in the business of life safety. So when there's an active shooter like this, why are you not going in and helping these people? And they said, boss, because they have guns, we don't, we're going to sit out here. And we said, okay, so if we provide you a team of police officers with guns, will you go in and help? So we created in 2010 our tiers per team. It's called our Technical Emergency Response Team. And all of our medics are trained in this, and basically it's a team of 4 police officers and 4 medics. And they go in immediately, and they go and triage the patients. And we've had this program in place since 2010. So this kind of gives you an idea of what we do with trends. I got to brag on the guys that we just did an exercise about 3 months ago at Verizon Amphitheater, and with 3 teams of these fine young men and women, they were able to triage over 200 patients in 5 minutes. So they're going in and doing exactly what they need to do. So we're looking at trends. You go to the next slide. And we know earlier you guys have heard a lot of testimony and talk about the Parkland shooting. Well, we were sitting around and I was looking at this. I was actually at home reading an article on this. And they talk about the fire alarms, that the gentleman pulled the fire alarm to get everybody in there. And there was a testimony from one of the teachers that she talks about. She says, I sat there and looked and there was confusion because people didn't know if they should lock the doors or go out for the fire alarm. And there was a group of students that were in line going out to do the fire alarm while shots were fired and they didn't move. It's because since kindergarten we've been trained to exit the school in single file line, follow the teacher, and go out on the fire alarm. So I started looking at the data, if you want to go, and I sat down. If you guys, there's a pamphlet I gave you, Safe Havens International. Safe Havens International, I do believe, is a local organization that goes around the world and talks about school safety. And I had an opportunity to sit through one of their presentations. And in their presentations, I'm sorry I don't have one for everybody, but they talked about the school-related fatalities from 1998 to 2012. And transportation incidents was the highest at 525. And then you go down and you see active shooter at 62, gang violence at 24, and then accidental death. What you don't see on there is fire-related deaths that happen in a school facility in the United States. So I asked him why, and he said, we don't have any reports of that. If you go back, the U.S. Fire Administration and look at their numbers, they have one before that in 1998, and it was probably like in the early 90s, but these numbers were started in 1998, so we haven't had any of those. So we started looking at, the next slide please, of what's going on and what the state law requires. And the state law requires that every school, every business have a plan. That's all it requires. The plan must be conducted monthly and trained on, okay? And then the last one is the fire alarm must make notifications with an audible alarm. So there has to be some kind of notification to a person that there's a fire alarm. It doesn't have to go throughout the whole school, there just has to be notification. And then you look at today's building codes. When you go back to 1998 and ask why there's no fire-related activities, it's basically because of building codes. Building codes over the last 20 years have been designed with the fire protection and with all the material they have to build the schools as non-combustible to contain the hazard in the fire. So that's what it's designed for. So let's talk about big picture. We're looking at Alpharetta High School right here, okay? And I want you to look at this thing for 2 things. One is I want you to start thinking about the first 3 minutes of an active fire alarm. First 3 minutes, okay? Then I want you to look at this picture and think 2 things: confinement and evacuation. Right now, if that school has a fire alarm, it doesn't matter where they go, they evacuate. When they evacuate, and I'm sorry I don't have an updated picture now that it's complete, it's 10 years old. But you go down the back way and you go to the football fields. That's where they evacuate. When they get to the football fields, they do accountability check and roll call, okay? Happens every time. Every month they do their plan, that's the exact same thing they go. Now, those 2 top buildings in the front up there are the very top. The one on the right is the gym, the one on the left is the performing arts. Majority of the time, fire alarm during the day probably goes off in the gym and the boys' locker room on the right-hand side. It's not even attached to the building, and they evacuate that whole building. With today's building codes, with today's fire sprinkler system, that's going to contain in that building. So why are we evacuating that whole school? It's because that's what our practices are. And so think about that. The confinement, like I said, is in that building. If you go to the next slide, please. We've created a program called Active. Now this is for all the buildings in Alpharetta, that is our mega churches, our private schools, and our large businesses. We have not been able to get to the public school system because they are waiting on direction from the state. And so what we do, except for Forsyth County has implemented a portion of this. And basically, if you want to go to your packet and look, each applicant gets this packet, each facility. Usually it's a facilities manager or school principal or school safety officer. And we have Active. Active is the acronym for alarm activation, confined in place, telephone 911 immediately, investigate fire alarm, validate threat, and evacuate. Remember the first 3 minutes. There was so much confusion in Parkland because they did not know to do a threat from an active shooter or the fire alarm. If we go ahead and treat all those alarms the same for the first 3 to 5 minutes, we can eliminate so much. That's what the premises of our program. The next page is just a little bit of a summary they get. And then if you go to the last page, there's and we'll just leave that over. If you go to the last page, there's a flow chart. And this is a flow chart that they must follow. Basically, the alarm activates, right? It has to immediately, they lock in place, just like they would if it was an active threat. They lock down in place. Then the operator, wherever that is, some of the churches have somebody that monitors the alarm panel. A lot of the schools have a secretary that sits right next to the alarm panel. They make notification through a communication device that all these facilities have with hand radios. And they notify somebody that there's a fire alarm activation in hallway 2. That team is trained to go and investigate to validate if this is a threat or not. Now, if they go to validate and there is no smoke, everybody remains in the rooms. Remember, the construction is built with these new schools, actually in the last 25 to 30 years, to contain that threat. Now, if they're going down the hallway and they start to see smoke, they validated that there is smoke. They have a flow chart they go to that says, okay, I go back, confirm it. Now we activate the full fire alarm so everybody gets out. The other practice they're doing when evacuating is not evacuating into an open field, but back into a place of refuge. So if you're in the gym, you can go back into the main building because it's not attached, there's no threat of fire in that building, and lock down in place. So the last page. Go back real quick. So there are some requirements that you have to meet when we talk about this. So one of the things is you have to be 100% compliant with life safety codes. Every fire department has a fire marshal's office that goes out and conducts it, and the state conducts fire life safety codes. As long as your facility is 100% compliant, you can participate in this program. You have to have non-combustible construction. I know that there's a lot of rural areas that still have wooden structures they're using for schools. We would not recommend this program in that, but in non-combustible constructions, you can do that. You have to have the available staff, a maintenance, security, admin, somebody that has the ability to go and check it. In schools, it's usually admin, coaches. A lot of coaches have radios that they get involved, or maintenance staff. And then they have to complete our 4-hour training course. So the next slide, the last, is basically we would like for you guys to come and look at this program, make a recommendation to the state, for the State Fire Marshal's Office, and or GEMA's school safety program to come and look at this and maybe adopt this as a safe practice, because we really do believe in Alpharetta this is a paradigm shift, because we all learned to exit with a fire alarm, but it will save lives in the long run.
Thank you for that presentation. My question is it not true that, I'm still in the sentence, so I'm thinking about that too. Arson investigators, aren't they dual, they are officers police trained as well as firefighters, or are they?
So that's going to depend on different locations, the local and how they have it set up. They should be. There are a lot of rural departments in the fire department that rely on the state arson investigators who are close certified, but a lot of the local jurisdictions in the metro Atlanta, you're absolutely correct.
Thank you.
Questions? I know Senator Moss, former firefighter and fire chief up in North Georgia, and I'm a proud member of the Alpharetta Fire Department, so please give my chief a hand. Thank you very much. We appreciate everybody's feedback today. One thing I did want to mention is we want to keep all students, faculty, and staff and teachers safe. That includes our private schools in Georgia, not just our public schools. We are getting information from them as well. The state does have some of a role, but not a full role like we would in a public school scenario. But we want to make sure people are safe no matter where they are, and we'll be looking at that. Again, I want to remind everybody that everything we have today has been live streamed thanks to our Senate Press Office. Again, our website, GASenate-K12safety.com, is where you'll find copies of presentations, videos, information about future meetings. If you are not tech savvy, right down in front on the stage here, you can fill out one of the forms. We are capturing all of that information and putting it in our database. Your ideas and thoughts matter. Please take time to do that both now and in the future. We will wind up the committee in November. Looks like we're targeting November the 13th right now to have our final meeting, at which point the committee members will be voting on a final report and recommendations to move forward. So if there are no other comments from the committee members, oh, there's one more.
Just thank our friends at Chamblee High School.
I would thank you very much, Senator Miller. Good point. All of our folks from Chamblee Charter High School, as well as the Cat County Schools, let's give them one more round of applause. Thank you for your hospitality. Everyone, please have a safe day, and thank you for participating. This meeting is hereby adjourned.